My name is Jerry Gill. Today is August 9th, 2010. I'm visiting Dr. Karl Reid on the Oklahoma State University campus in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is for the O State Storage Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Karl, I know you got a busy schedule. School starting here pretty quick, and thank you for taking time to come over and visit with us this afternoon. Appreciate it.
It's good to be here.
Karl, you've got your history at Oklahoma State University and the College of Engineering dates back, well, kind of your student dates back to the 1950s. So you have a long collective corporate memory of Oklahoma State University. And certainly we want to talk about some of these experiences, but first, could we go back and talk a little bit about your early life? Can you share about where you grew up, a little bit about your family?
Born in Fayetteville, Arkansas, moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma when I was 1 year old. I grew up in Tulsa. I went to school in Tulsa, the grade school, middle school, high school level. Graduated from Will Rogers High School.
Will Rogers Roper?
1952, Will Rogers Roper.
What did your father do, Karl?
My father was a civil engineer, worked with the U.S. Corps of Engineers in the Tulsa district. And so I got a lot of interest from him in engineering, but I really started out to be an architect. And I came to Oklahoma State University. No one in my class really thought about leaving the state. So I chose between OU and OSU. I understood that the OU architecture program was kind of far out. And I'm a conservative guy. Imprint on me from World War II when I was a child, and I decided I'd take the conservative school, and that was Oklahoma State A&M College, not Oklahoma State University at that time.
Karl, did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had a brother that died at 9 days old. So I'm really an only child in most ways.
Was your mother a traditional housewife, or did she have a job outside the home as well?
My mother worked at various jobs over the years. She was both a housewife and a person who helped put me through school. I didn't realize till some years later that she went back to work before I started Oklahoma A&M College in order for me not to have to work. And so I'm very, very indebted to my mother and my father, of course.
Karl, did you have any school or community activities that you were getting involved in? Any special interest that you had?
I was in the Troy option of mechanical engineering, and many of my classmates went on to become CEOs of major corporations. And look what happened to me.
But I was thinking here about more growing up. I'm trying to get kind of sense. Did you have any particular hobbies or interests?
Well, in early years.
In your early years?
Yes, I had hobbies in golf. I played basketball in high school for 2 years. Played golf for 3 years. I was #1 man on my team, but we weren't a very good team.
What about your basketball career? Pretty good basketball player?
Pretty average. I was tall, and they liked me because of my height, but I wasn't very good. I stayed on the team for a couple of years, and then I dropped out because I wasn't really contributing.
What you kind of gave me a little bit of idea about what your choice of going to OSU, but on the back up from that and ask you first of all, from your family, from your dad and your mom growing up, there's some values you learned growing up that helped you be successful later in your life.
Absolutely. Work ethic I got from both my father and my mother was very important to my whole career. The honesty and integrity I got from both of them has been very important to me in my whole career. I was blessed with parents who cared about me, who followed everything I did, encouraged me at every juncture along the way through secondary school as well as through OSU, and they didn't hover over me. They weren't the helicopter parents, but they were very, very concerned parents, and they wanted the best for me.
So you made your selection to enroll at Oklahoma State based on you thinking you're going to be an architect?
Thinking I was going to be an architect.
So you started off in the School of Architecture?
Well, I started off in the College of Engineering, Architecture, and Technology. Then was called the Oklahoma Institute of Technology. And I started the first semester, I didn't take any architecture courses. But I went in to see the advisor, John O'Toole, and I said, Mr. O'Toole, I don't believe that I'm artistic enough to be an architect. And he said, what do you believe you're artistic enough to do? And I said, mechanical engineering, I believe. Because I'd had a mechanical drawing class in high school, and I took it because I couldn't take the architecture drafting class, because that interfered with 6-hour sports. So I ended up very impressed with that class, and ended up in mechanical engineering during my first semester. That was my second semester, excuse me.
So you enrolled in the fall of 1952,
Fall of 1952.
and I guess was Wilhelm.
Oliver Wilhelm was president.
And so Dr. Bennett just died the year before.
That's correct. And the student union and the library were new buildings. It was a sparkling place.
What do you remember about the campus, Carl? Can you expand that a little bit about some of your first impressions of the OSU campus and Stillwater community?
Beautiful campus. I still believe it is today, but it really impressed me with the people that cared about what the campus looked like at that time. So I felt like it was the right choice for me, the right place for me to be.
Did you have some favorite hangouts on campus? Other than the library, I'm sure as an engineering student, you're in the library quite a bit, Carl.
My first year I lived in Bennett Hall,
Mm-hmm.
and I joined a social fraternity, joined Sigma Phi Epsilon. And I guess the hangout was, if I had one, I really didn't have one, but I did go to the frat shop quite a bit because it was right across the street. And that was a good place to have a malt or a cup of coffee or whatever.
Carl, can you kind of talk about some of your student experience, some of the student activities you're involved in, organizations you're part of? You talked about being in the fraternity, the other things you're involved in.
Yes, I was active in my church, starting at the First Baptist Church, and then the sophomore year I went to the College Heights Baptist Church, which is now the University Heights Baptist Church. I was active in most organizations that an engineering student would be involved with. I was president of the American Society for Mechanical Engineers, president of Pi Tau Sigma, the honorary fraternity in mechanical engineering. I was a member of ODK, I was a member of Blue Key. I spent a lot of time in organizations.
You did.
And I had to work pretty hard, work long hours in order to do it, but I enjoyed it.
It's pretty unusual, isn't it, Carl, frankly, for an engineering student to be able to be engaged in many activities, so you must have been working a lot of hours.
I did work a lot of hours, but I always have, and I always enjoyed it. I was also in the ROTC. So the first 2 years was compulsory ROTC, and I had to make a decision on whether to go to advanced ROTC. That was optional. Korean War was underway, and I didn't want to go to the war as an enlisted man. To be very honest, I wanted to go as an officer if I were called up. And so I decided to go into advanced ROTC. By the time I started, Korean War was over. But I did graduate with a degree in mechanical engineering, petroleum option, a commission in the U.S. Army.
Interesting.
And over a 3-week period, I graduated in a summer school. One Saturday, the next Saturday I got commissioned in the U.S. Army. The next Saturday I got married to Verna.
That's pretty interesting.
So I averaged 19 and a half hours per semester as an undergraduate. Kind of unheard of today. But part of that, of course, was ROTC. Ended up with 165 credit hours in 4 years and 1 summer.
So you graduated in 56 then?
56
and which was in an engineering program, about a 5-year program normally?
Most all of my classmates went at least another semester or 2.
Yeah, that's great. Carl, were there some professors or staff that you remember at the time that were influential in your development as a student?
Yes, there were several professors that made a big influence on my life. First one was a mathematics professor, Herb Schultz. Herb Schultz taught college algebra, and my math background in high school was so good that was a pretty easy course, that and trigonometry, but that was where all the engineering students started in, regardless of background. But he was very, very good. Second person was Jay Boggs in mechanical engineering, later to become head of mechanical engineering. And I studied thermodynamics from him, which is kind of the number one course in all of engineering. people either like or despise. And he made it fun. He made it interesting. Another person that had a great influence on me, but probably later in life, I was working on my master's degree, was Karl Reid. Karl Reid was affectionately or unaffectionately called Pop. And he was not liked by most students. But I liked him very much because I thought he was really good. He was a textbook writer. He was teaching a course unique in all of mechanical engineering education at that time, in power. He had some unusual techniques in the classroom that irritated students a great deal. But the reason I liked him came when I was working in my master's degree, and he was retired. And he was spending his time every day in the office working on his family tree. And I went in to see him, and I'd written my master's thesis, and I said, Professor Leonard, I understand that you read theses of graduate students, and of course there weren't very many graduate students. And he said, yes, I would. I said, would you be kind enough to read my thesis? I just finished writing my master's thesis. He said, sure. He said, come back tomorrow. And I was really surprised, but I came back tomorrow. And he gave me my thesis back, and it was solid red. So I worked 2 weeks to fix that. I took it back to him and I said, would you read it again? He said, yes, come back tomorrow. When I came back, picked it up, it was solid red. Now my wife was typing that on an old-fashioned typewriter. So she typed it a third time, and I took it in to the head of department's assistant, Mildred Avery. And I said, Mildred, this is the first perfect master's thesis that's ever been done at Oklahoma State University. And she opened it up and saw 2 typographical errors where she opened it up. So my wife had to type it a 4th time. I'm still married after 54 years.
Probably think about that, Professor. Were there some professors you remember that were sort of would be called, quote, characters, and personalities?
Well, Pop Leonard was a character.
Could you share some of those, people might have forgotten about that were teaching back in the 50s, that were, kind of had strong personalities and would be, quote, characters?
Well, Leonard stands out among all in mechanical engineering. Another person that was, I wouldn't say was a character, but very interesting personality was Laddie Fila. Laddie Fila taught in the aerospace area, but he was also the advisor for the honorary fraternity when I was a senior and president of the fraternity. He had a great deal of influence on me because he was non-traditional. He was Czechoslovakian, I believe, Yugoslavian, and his methods of teaching were quite different than most. And I went in to see him one day about a problem I had in a mechanical vibrations course. And his approach was so different than any others I'd experienced. He didn't tell me how to work the problem, but he got me in the frame of mind to help me learn how to work it myself. And I thought he was just a superb teacher. And as department head, I depended on him very heavily for doing some of the unusual things in the department, and he always was ready to help in whatever way.
Carl, you talked about graduating in 56, I guess in the summer of 56. Did you had your commission at ROTC? Did you go directly into your graduate program at that time, or did you have to serve at that time?
When I finished the BS degree and got commissioned in the U.S. Army, the Korean War was over, and there was a great deal of uncertainty on what was going to happen next. And so I went back to graduate school at Oklahoma State University. The name was changed in 1957, so I got a BS degree from Oklahoma A&M College and an MS degree from Oklahoma State University. That's 2 different universities. So I didn't know for sure when I was going to get called up. So I decided to start working on a master's degree, and I had the first fellowship in mechanical engineering as a result of Ernie Fitch's marvelous experience in salesmanship. Got it from Vickers Incorporated, the largest hydraulic equipment company in the nation. And so I went back to school and worked for a year and a half, and then I got called up and went in for 6 months because the Army decided it had too many officers. And so what was probably most interesting about that period is I considered going regular Army when I graduated with a BS degree. By the time I finished my master's degree, I was sure that I did not want to. I wanted to go into further study in engineering, in mechanical engineering. And so the pivotal time was when I was a master's student, went to Vickers, my supporter on the fellowship, worked for the summer for them, and met a person who had been a faculty member at MIT. But when I met him, I didn't know that. His name was Gerhard Reithoff. And he probably had as much influence on me as anybody in my whole academic career, other than Low and Shearer when I got to MIT. But I went in to see Dr. Reithoff and I said, you know, I like what I'm doing this summer. I like this field of fluid power control and the greater field of automatic control. I think I'd like to work on my doctorate somewhere and spend about half my time in management programs and about half my time in mechanical engineering in this field of automatic control. And he caught me by surprise. And he looked at me very sternly as a good German would, and he said, bad idea, bad idea. Be a good mechanical engineer first. And if you're a good mechanical engineer and your organization believes you have management talent, they'll make a manager out of you. That was advice that I've given hundreds of times since that time to my students. So I said, well, where should I go? Where can I go to school and study in this field? He said, well, there's only one place, and that's MIT. He caught me by surprise again. I said, that's in Boston. He said, no, it's in Cambridge. So I went back to my desk after that meeting, and there's a student sitting beside me, and I said, where do you go to school? He said, I go to MIT. And I said, oh, that's in Cambridge. So I went to MIT. I was able to get into an administrative position there. It wasn't my choice, but I was asked to do that. A major position in mechanical engineering, in charge of 2 major laboratories, and about 8 people reported to me. So I had an early department head experience there as a graduate student.
Well, Carl, let me kind of back up 2 quick questions. And your master's at Oklahoma State, who did you study under? Who was your chairman of your committee?
Ernie Fitch.
Okay.
And Ernie Fitch lives in Stillwater, America.
Okay.
And his course was very, very important in my development as undergraduate and graduate student.
So after your summer of work, then you went to MIT and...
No, after my summer work, I came back and continued working on, finished my master's,
Okay.
but I continued doing research until I got called up. And I got called up in March of 1957. No, March of 1958.
So you completed your master's in '58 as well. That
Yes.
spring. Okay. But Carl, help me understand. So when you went to MIT, first of all, I assume you had a good fellowship or assistantship or.
I was offered 4 different research assistantships.
Okay.
And 2 of them were in areas that I really knew nothing about at all. One was in a field called cryogenics, and I said, I don't believe that would be a good field for me. I might not be successful. So I ended up going into the field that drew me to MIT to start with. That was in the controls division of mechanical engineering.
Okay.
Most unusual time at MIT, because the masters of each of the fields of mechanical engineering were there on the faculty at that time. And I didn't fully appreciate that at the time. But the number 1 people in the nation and some in the world were in each of the technical areas of mechanical engineering. So I was extremely fortunate to be there at that time, because they were going to be retiring in the next 4 or 5 years.
So Carl, you turned 58 and you graduated in...
Graduated with a BS degree in 1956, master's degree in 1958, and then I graduated with my Doctor of Science from MIT in 1964.
And the reason that was a little longer program was you were talking about you had some administrative responsibility.
I was a full-time administrator for 4 years. And,
what were some of your duties? there?
Well, I ran what was called the Engineering Projects Laboratory. In fact, I helped transition the old mechanical engineering laboratories into modern times.
Wow.
And we had steam engines, and we had a lot of equipment that was really pretty well obsolete. And I was responsible for not only managing the whole transition and rebuilding the building, but getting rid of all that equipment. And I gave most of it to a museum in Kansas City. And then I became the full-time director, the first director of the Engineering Projects Laboratory. And that was a laboratory where all the undergraduate students at MIT had several courses. And much of the research from about, the research of at least a half of the faculty was done in that laboratory. And I did my research in that laboratory. So I had 4 years of a full-time administrative position and had 8 people reporting to me, electronic technicians, mechanical technicians, and 3 secretarial staff members.
Probably pretty unusual. I mean,
Very, very unusual.
Invited MIT as a doctoral student at the same time managing the lab.
I think that's why I was offered a 4 professorship when I was nearing graduation. It was a 3-year term, but I decided that I'd been there long enough and I needed to spread out my wings. And Jay Boggs had been calling me every year for 4 years. So I finally came back and said, okay, I'll put my stake here at Oklahoma State University.
Well, that was kind of my next question is, MIT, I'm sure you had, like I said, an offer there, and probably other places across the country. Why OSU? Why did you decide to come back?
Let me back up just a moment. When I went to MIT, I was first a research assistant. And I got to know a faculty member named Lowen Shearer, who was head of the Controls and Systems Division, Controls and Design Division, one of the 3 major parts of mechanical engineering. I realize there are 55 or 60 faculty members there in mechanical engineering. So it's about half as big as my college today in just one department. So Lowen Shearer took me under his wing as a research assistant. And then as we got to talking, he said, I'd like for you to be my teaching assistant next year. So I did. I was in an office with a Polish professor, visiting professor from Warsaw Polytechnic Institute, and a faculty member and a doctoral student by the name of Thomas Sheridan, who was to become a professor at MIT. Is world renowned in his field. And I had just a wonderful experience in that large office with those 2 people. And as we talked more and more, I got more interested in research. So I got back into research. Lowen Shearer made a very active researcher out of me, even while I was administrator. And I worked on Air Force contracts for 5 years and I did some very interesting things. And I thought, well, maybe a combination of teaching and research. When I was back in that office, I was tutoring students at the undergraduate level, one of whom is now the Dean of Engineering at Penn State University. And there's several more out there that I still have a strong network with. But when I went to MIT, I never thought I'd go anywhere but the corporate world. And when I had that 2nd-year experience, I decided I would perhaps look more carefully at academia. And when Jay Boggs kept calling me, and I said, well, I don't really know. And he said, well, I'll call you again in 6 months, and he did. And so finally he talked me into coming to Stillwater, and it was a very informal interview. But I met the faculty, but it wasn't the kind of formalities we have today. And he said, Karl would like for you to come and join the faculty. And I said, well, let me think about it a little bit. So as Fernando and I were driving from Stillwater, it was in the summertime, it was dead here. Driving back to Tulsa, we'd been living in Boston for all those years. And I said, this is a dead place. I'm not sure I want to go back. I got back only a few days, and Jay Boggs called me and he said, I need an answer from you. I need for you to come. We need you to join the faculty. And I did. And I was the 13th PhD to join the faculty. He was the first. He was the only PhD on the faculty when I was a student. When I came back, I was the 13th.
Wow.
Of course, 13 is an unlucky number, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, after you come back, you moved through the ranks pretty quickly, Karl.
Well, I did.
From, up to full professor and then head of the School of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. Can you talk about that period as you were going through your assistant associate professor years and up to department head? What about your research and kind of what was happening professionally in your career?
When I first came back as a doctoral student, as a graduate of MIT, I first worked on some continuation of things I'd started in MIT, which is pretty normal for a new, fresh faculty member just fresh out of the PhD. It soon became obvious that there were some other areas I could move into. So I moved into biomedical engineering, but I also got some contracts in fluid power control from Ellis Chalmers, from U.S. Army Tank Automotive Command, and National Science Foundation. And so I stayed in my field, but I started adding to this, the biomedical engineering. I really used my background in a field called fluidics, and I was the first person in fluidics at MIT. It was later become quite a big field. And today even we use that terminology related to an area of medicine. But felt like I could apply fluidics to the biomedical area. And so through the course of my particularly associate professor years, I was working in that area and along with some very, very good graduate students, developed a lung ventilator that was superior to anything in the marketplace that day, at that time. And so we were able to get a patent on it. Wynn Jones was the director of clinical research in the College of Engineering Medicine, and I got to know him, and we evaluated the ventilator in several places, including a hospital in Dallas, and decided we'd go ahead and try to license it to a company. We did, to a company called, forgot the name now, in St. Louis. What I didn't know is the company did not really have engineers. They had one. They didn't really have a focus on designing things. They had a focus only on marketing. And they were very, very good at the time in that area. And all hospitals had a wall station in a patient's room that was made by that company. So it seemed like the right thing to do, but they didn't have the talent to develop that idea any further. So we did it. And so we developed 4 ventilators, and with their approval, took them out and did clinical tests on those at 4 major hospitals in the nation, including Los Angeles County Hospital, Barnes Hospital in St. Louis, and we had excellent results. A problem, though, is that they, not knowing for sure where they would succeed with our ventilator, bought another company that was making a copy of the best ventilator at the time. And they put it out on clinical tests, and they killed 2 people, or 2 people died. I'm sure they killed 2 people. And they got very antsy, and so they withdrew from the business entirely. So we were left 6 years in our patent without any resource. Now, I do still have one of those ventilators. And when we inducted B.N. Morale into the College Hall of Fame, he was the one that worked with me to develop those 4 ventilators. In fact, he did all the work. He took them to the various hospitals. One of the hospitals was the University Hospital at University of Oklahoma. And he took it down, and they evaluated, called back several days later and says, not working. So we went down and picked it up, brought it back to the laboratory, and we worked on it together. And it was working fine. So he took it back down, and he took it to the OR, not the OR, the emergency room. And it was chaotic. And they just as he arrived, they brought in a man that weighed about 450 pounds. And one of the emergency doctors called out, we need a ventilator for a large guy. And B.N. Morale says, I got one. So put it on him. And we had ours a little oversized, so we didn't have any trouble. And he saved that man with that ventilator. So we're very proud of things like that. When he was inducted into the College Hall of Fame about 7 or 8 years ago, I was able to display that ventilator in the front of the ballroom there. Still have it in the archives.
Great story. Carl, looking back in the time when you were head of the mechanical and aerospace engineering program, were there some milestones or accomplishments that stand out in your mind, within the department about 14 years you served?
13 years as department head. I think the biggest accomplishments were we grew in research without sacrificing the undergraduate experience. And so that balance was always very, very important to me. That we have a sense of mission to serve the new student that comes from this campus as a freshman, or the student that transfers in after 1 or 2 years from a community college. And we wanted to be very proud of our BS graduates, because most of our BS graduates go into the workplace as professionals, and they do very, very well. But we also had started under a predecessor of mine, Pete Lohman, 2 deans back, a research program. And it was still growing, but I think the growth of that research program in mechanical engineering was one of the greatest achievements we had during those years. Another thing we had was kind of almost funny in a way. The first overhead projector brought to Oklahoma State University was brought by my department head, Lee Harrisburg, when I was a faculty member before I became head. And it was revolutionary. But he was a very innovative, visionary guy, and so for him to bring it was normal for him, but abnormal for the rest of the campus. When I became a full professor, and I worked with Charles Bacon to develop the concept of the System Science Center, and we got a major grant from the National Science Foundation to support that center, matched with some money from the state of Oklahoma. At that time, it was $1 million to be spent over 5 years. $1 million was a lot more than $1 million today. So we did some marvelous things during that time period. Brought our faculties together in mechanical and electrical engineering, had 16 hours of cross-listed and co-taught coursework at the undergraduate and graduate level. And I consider that a kind of a milestone and a very important achievement, because we built an interest in the dynamic systems and control area, and that continues to be a strength of the college today. Along the way, we built laboratories as well. So we were pretty poor in terms of research laboratories. And I put quite a bit of that $1 million into building laboratories in mechanical engineering. But Charles Bacon and I developed a bond that was very, very unusual and continues today. I was a new faculty member, and then a year later he became in as a new faculty member. Just prior to his coming in, Pete Lohman called the senior faculty member in electrical engineering, Gill Blackwell, together with me into his office and said, "We understand that you have an interest in working together. How can I help?" And that was a pivotal moment. Pete Lohman was he was a tough Dutchman. But he had a great vision, and he knew where we needed to be, and he worked hard to get us there. He raised the money to build Engineering North. $2 million it cost.
$2 million.
When we built the HRC, it was $35 million. When we built the Helmrich Center in Tulsa, it was $45 million. So things changed a little bit in terms of dollar value. But I should say Pete Lohman probably had as much influence on my later professional career after I became a department head. He called me in one day and said, "I want you to be department head." And we interviewed 3 people, but things were very informal at that time. And I said, "But Pete Lohman, I don't understand. You have 4 people in the department that are older than me and have more experience than I do in the department that have applied, and you interviewed 3 people." He said, "But I don't want any of those to serve as head. I want you to serve as head." And I said, "Well," and I seemed a little concerned. He said, "I've talked to the faculty, and they said it would be acceptable to them for you to serve as head, providing you didn't lose track of their basic missions of teaching and research." And so at that time, I developed my concept that I've stayed with ever since that time, of always being involved in research and always being involved in teaching. throughout my entire career as a faculty member, surely, as a department head and as a dean. And I don't brag about it, it's a value to me because it keeps me from losing track of what the faculty job is at Oklahoma State University. And so by continuing to be involved, I think I've maintained that understanding.
Were you working with the web handling center at that time?
Well, that all started very interestingly. For several years, I had been attending the Central Oklahoma section of American Society for Mechanical Engineers meeting in Oklahoma City. It was appropriate for me. From the first time I joined the faculty until I was a senior faculty member, I was there most every month. And I met a person from Fife Corporation in Oklahoma City by the name of Bruce Firetag. And Bruce was the director of research and engineering for Fife. And he would say to me, why don't you start a center at Oklahoma State University and consult for companies that have problems in web handling that they keep calling me to solve, but they think it's our system, but it's not our system. And you ought to have a center. So I said, well, we don't do that sort of thing very well in the university setting. I did that. This went on for about 3 or 4 years. And then 3 people in our college, the head of chemical engineering, Billy Crines, and the associate dean for research, Tony Hines, and myself, talking one day, decided that we ought to recommend to the dean that we not try to spread ourselves too thin in research, but we ought to try to focus on a few areas and do those very, very well. And if there's marginal resources, we put them into those areas. So in discussion, we decided first that we had to identify the areas, and the areas had to be identified with faculty strengths or areas that the faculty would not rebel at, because we didn't want to forget that they were doing some very good things. And so we came up with 3 areas: water, energy, and manufacturing. And I was the proponent for manufacturing. So we already had faculty strength in water and in energy, but we had nothing in manufacturing. But I felt like it was important, and there was a long story behind that. It had been neglected in engineering for years up until that time. I can see where we couldn't neglect it any further, so we were one of the first universities to get back into manufacturing. But I developed that, said, okay, you're the one that promoted this, you need to develop it. So I did, we took it to the dean, and that started then the idea of focusing much more, which led to the System Science Center, which led to the State Center of Excellence in Design and Manufacturing that was supported by the Oklahoma Center for Advancement of Science and Technology.
This is more interaction with the academic components of the university with the industry.
That's correct. And in fact, I've always worked on the boundary between the academic world and the industrial world. My early career in research was sponsored in part by the National Science Foundation, but in part by the industry. And I grew to enjoy that interaction and believe that we were doing some things that were very important. I think we also did some things important in biomedical engineering with the hospital in Oklahoma City. But that's another story.
Oh, you were appointed dean of the College of Engineering, Architecture, and Technology in 1986. Was that exciting for you to be dean of the college of your alma mater? I mean, it's got to be a pretty special thing.
It was very special, but it was unexpected.
Share the story.
There were 4 candidates after all the screening, and one of the candidates was Winfred Phillips, then at Purdue University. And Win Phillips was a good friend of mine through professional activities with American Society for Mechanical Engineers. And I recommended him, and he applied. And so there's a person there that applied that I wanted to apply. And I really thought he would become the dean. He turned it down. I think he withdrew before the end. So Dr. Larry Boger was president, and he called me in early January. I think it was Friday in January. I'm not sure that was Friday 13th, but it was a Friday, first Friday, I think. And he said, I want you to be the dean.
Carl, can I just, had you applied at this point?
Oh, yes.
I mean, so you
First job I'd ever applied for,
okay.
because it was necessary. As a department head, I didn't apply for head of mechanical engineering, because we didn't do that at that time.
Right.
It was a very informal process. But by the time I was a senior faculty member from 1972, I became a full professor, and I think that from some time after that, we started being a little bit more formal. And by the time the dean's job was open, then it was very formal. There was a search committee, and Dr. Boker headed the search committee. And so it was either apply or not apply. And I had no interest in applying. I was going to go back on the faculty and be a teacher and researcher, because that's what I came to Oklahoma State University to do. And that's where my passion was. And so a department head who shared council meetings with me every week, chaired by Dean Lohman, came into my office, and that was John Bryant, head of architecture. And John said, I'd like to encourage you to apply for the dean's job. I said, John, I'm not interested. I'm going back on the faculty. And he said, I'm going to encourage you to apply for the dean's job. And he came back the next day. And so about the third day, I said, well, John, you really think that I should? He said, I really think you should. So John was the most influential person on that decision. And I applied, but then I immediately no, it was before that I had recommended Win Phillips. I said, well, Win Phillips is the guy, and I'll just be lucky if he gets it, and we have a strong team. And so when Boker called me in and asked me to be the dean, and I said, it was a Friday, I said, well, can I have about a month to clean up my office and do some things, some projects that are kind of in near end stage? He said, no, you're dean on Monday. He said, the faculty will expect you to be the dean as soon as it's announced. So I was behind then, I'm still behind.
You still got the cleanup you hadn't got to yet.
I need to tell you a story though. When I went in to see Pete Lohman, he said, I want you to be dean. I had just 3 days before talked to a former faculty member of mine at MIT, Herbert Richardson, another influential guy in my career. Herbert Richardson was the chief scientist of the U.S. Department of Transportation. And he called me and said, Karl, we're starting a new university grants program. We'd like for you to come to Washington and run it. And I'd worked with Herb on a number of activities, professional activities, sponsored by the National Science Foundation, and a very important part of my career was some experience I got there. But I said, well, Herb, I don't know whether I should or not. He said, well, I think you should. I said, well, let me think about it. So a few days go by, and he calls again. And I said, well, I don't think so. And Dean Lohman called me in that day and said, I want you to be dean. So the day after, he called me in to ask me to be dean and asked me, I said, well, can I think on it a little bit? And he said, yes. How long do you need? And I said, well, can I tell you tomorrow? It was kind of unusual. And but before I went in to see him, Herb Richardson called me again. And he said, Karl, we really want you to come to Washington. Could I call your president? I said, oh, please don't do that. Well, could I call your dean? Please don't do that. I've just accepted a job. And actually, I'd been in to see Lohman and accepted the job, and then I got the call. Got that out of order. And so I got concerned that he might call my dean. So I went back to see Lohman, and I explained this process to him. And I said, I've accepted the job. I'm delighted to be asked to do it. If you get a call, you'll understand. He said, you don't have the job. I said, well, I understand. He said, well, I'm taking away the offer. I want you to take a week and think about it and decide whether you want to go to Washington or you want to stay here. I want you to really think about it. Mm-hmm. Stay here as department head or go to Washington, run the university grants program, which I understand was going to be a $5 million a year program. So it was the most miserable week I've ever had. At the end of the week, I was convinced I wanted to be the department head. So I told him I would. I called Harold Richardson back, said, thank you very much for the offer, but I appreciate your thinking of me, but I'm going to stay here as department head. About 5 years ago, we got a grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation that we share with University of Oklahoma and Langston University. And I was chairman of the first board of directors of that. And it's from the program that grew out of the program that I would have gone to develop, which is a much bigger program today than I would have had.
In the circle of life, right?
Yes, circle of life.
Karl, when you became dean, early on in your administration, did you set out some priorities and goals for the college?
I did. My first presentation to the faculty was as a candidate, and I set forth some goals and priorities at that time. And they really centered around student experience at the undergraduate level, growing our research program, and growing our service. And I believe all three of those parts of our mission are critical, and that our college need to be involved. And I think I've carried that through with commitment since that time, and still believe the same way I did at that time.
Would that be kind of adding on to the land grant philosophy? I mean, research,
Absolutely.
teaching, research, and extension, or outreach and service to the public.
That's correct. I guess I was an early adopter of the idea of what a land grant university is. I had a much better idea after I met John Campbell, and I got to know John and had a very, very good relationship with John. And he taught me a great deal more about the land grant mission. And I realized as a result of that how much more important the service was than we were giving to it as a college. And so today, our college is about a $45 million a year business. And a little over a third is outreach. And a third is research, and a third is undergraduate, graduate instruction, and distance education. We're a very major player in distance education.
Would you, looking back, this is, we're talking here around, 24 years now. Karl is dean, give or take a few months. So you had your goals and priorities. I mean, looking back, what did you achieve some of those? What were your major, could you state some milestones in the college, some recognition, some accomplishments in the college that were important?
When I started as dean, I thought I would focus on priorities for instructional programs. I had never heard of distance education at that time. Both undergraduate and graduate instructional programs on this campus. I also thought we needed to build our research program. And so I put a lot of focus on those things. I also put a lot of focus on faculty development. And I encouraged our faculty wherever possible to get engaged in national activities. And I myself got involved in national activities, became vice president eventually of American Society for Mechanical Engineers. But I did not know really what distance education was. I didn't really know how important that was going to be to our role in outreach as a college. I didn't have any understanding at all of fundraising. It never occurred to me that part of my job would be to raise funds, other than writing proposals for grants. That was normal. And I'd written a lot of proposals, been very successful, but to ask somebody for a private gift was unknown to me at that time. Today, about a third of my time is spent fundraising, and maybe more. I'd say half my time is spent in fundraising and PR, public relations.
Cultivation, quote unquote.
Cultivation. And when I became dean, I didn't have any idea that's the way my job would develop. But that's the way most engineering deans in the country have developed at that time.
Karl, there were some, as I recall, looking back over the years, some important scholarship and student enrichment programs are initiated in your college,
well, I think
especially for women and underrepresented groups. Could you
things
talk
I'm
about that?
most pleased about is we've grown our research program immensely. We've become very, very successful in fundraising, and I've become able to ask people for money that I didn't think I would ever be able to do. But the things that probably stand out more than anything for me personally are the special enrichment programs we built in college. So just after I become dean, I sat down with Virgil Nichols and Bob Hollow. Both had taught in the high school. Both had taught math and chemistry. And I said, you know, I'm a new dean and the enrollment is going down. So I'm not going to be a very popular dean unless we can turn that around. We can put in a strategy that will emphasize numbers, or we can put in a strategy that emphasizes quality. Which should we do? Well, the answer was obvious. We should focus on quality. And I said, how should we do that? I said, they didn't probably say this at that time, but the implication was, that's your problem. So I sat down with the Director of Student Academic Services, Larry Zirkle, and said, you know, if we're going to do something to increase the quality, we've got to have a special program. That year, Stillwater High School graduated 11 National Merit Scholars, and 8 of them went to the University of Texas at Austin, and 5 of those were engineering. And I said, how does that happen that they were able to go? Well, scholarships were the primary thing. We couldn't compete. So we had to come up with a program which was unique and would be attractive to students and their parents more than scholarships. And we made it. The first program was called the Scholars Enrichment Program. Later we added a Phillips Scholars Program. When Wayne Allen was a guest of mine at the football game and we were in the press box, and he said, Karl, while I'm chairman, I'd like to help you. Of course, I wasn't a fundraiser at that time. And I said, well, Wayne, while you're chairman of Phillips, I'd like for you to help me. What do you have in mind? He said about $1 million. And I said, well, anything will do. So Wayne and I designed the Phillips Scholars Program, which was based on the original program where we added scholarship money. The original program was enrichment only. Included a trip to Washington, D.C. after the sophomore year. Included a trip abroad after the junior year. In the early years, we went to Germany. And Wayne and I developed the program exactly like it, which just added scholarships and mentors from engineers at Phillips. He retired, and the new CEO had a different idea, but our Phillips Scholars Program was the base on which they built today's Spirit Scholars Program, which is in 6 universities. Actually, it's in more than 6, but it's in 6 major universities, or major programs in 6 universities. And so I'm very proud that our program was the base of that operation, and they recognized that very well. So we went a couple of years, and Wayne Allen called me one day and he said, you know, I'd like to start a new program similar to the Phillips program. He was retired. And I said, well, I'd like for you to help us again. And he did. And we have 2 major endowments. And I'm very proud of those. One's called the Allen Scholars Program. We've had 14 graduates, and then we raised it to a new level last year. And we have the first of the new Allen Scholars going to Cambridge University to study for a master's degree this fall. That's Renee Hale, who everyone at this university knows, because she was a Goldwater Scholar and an outstanding musician and just well known throughout the campus. But the original program has scholarships and mentorships, but the new program, still called the Allen Scholars Program, has all of that, including the trip to Washington, D.C. with the other scholars, including a trip to Japan now with the other scholars after the junior year. And then in the 5th year, as soon as they graduate, they go to Cambridge University, all expenses paid.
Does it include also some summer internships, Karl? Some working with, hands-on work with engineers in the summer programs?
Well, most of our students have summer internships, but the companies really recruit them. Yeah. And we don't, as a college, do more than just we provide services to the companies, but the companies really recruit them. But all of our engineering students will have a summer internship. If they don't, they're not going to be as marketable.
Karl, one impressive area, at least from my perspective, but I think university-wide, has been what you did with non-traditional students with minority students, women in engineering. You have some pretty creative programs. Could you share some programs you put together in those areas?
We had a program called Council of Partners that Dean Lohman started. And at that time, we had no African-American students in the college. There weren't any at OU. It was very unusual for an African-American student to come in engineering anywhere. And so he came up with this idea, Pete Lohman was a visionary, that we could bring together a community of people who believed that engineering would be feasible for African Americans. So the Council of Partners included company representatives that would support the program, as well as there was a civic leader, there was a pastor of a African American church, and so they all worked together to help us define the Council of Partners program. And they made the decisions in the early years of how to disperse the funds that the companies gave to us. And then there came a time when they were obviously very uncomfortable with making those decisions. And I was dean by that time. I said, would it make more sense for you to be an advisory committee rather than a decision-making committee? Oh, yes. And I said, then would it also make sense to you that we would broaden our program to include African Americans, Native Americans, and Hispanic Americans? At first they kind of cringed to that and they said, let's do it. And so that's what we did. And with excellent leadership of Virgil Nichols and the Director of Student Academic Services, we pulled that off and moved in a very significant way to have a strong element of diversity in our college. We graduate more Native Americans in engineering than any other school in the nation.
Wow.
And we don't brag about that, but it's kind of an impressive thing that we've done. Without, we have a director of multicultural affairs, and in fact, I first used that terminology on this campus because we were searching for something that made sense because we brought the three cultures together. And then we started a program, a living learning center in Bennett Hall. Bennett East Wing, 4th floor, was redone and put into apartment style. And I had breakfast one morning with 2 regents and told them we'd like to have co-ed living at Bennett Hall. And they did not like that at all, but they were very, very careful of the way they said it. And I convinced them that the way it was set up, it was perfectly okay. And we were able then to put in tutoring systems, and we had a live-in director who was one of our senior students who was Jewish and had a very strong commitment to helping us build a program of strength for minority students, which of course we had to have a name for it. So I coined the idea, as far as I know. Maybe others had coined it long before I did, but coined the idea of multicultural.
Karl, we were talking about your multicultural scholarship program and enrichment programs. Could you talk about maybe numbers of, say, women in engineering, African American, Hispanic, Native American, some numbers, and maybe cite some individuals that come through the program that have been very successful?
Well, let me take women first,
Okay.
because when I was first a faculty member, and even through the first years of my period as department head, we had no women in engineering. It was absolutely void. And but we had a professor in chemical engineering by the name of Ruth Urbar. And Ruth felt like there was an opportunity in engineering for more women than just her. And so she started talking to various members of the faculty and the department heads and the dean about how we could put a little more emphasis in this area. And it was very embryonic, but we started bringing some women in at that time. And most young women that came in at that time were top of the class. There weren't any that were, say, minimally qualified, and there weren't any women that were just good. They were outstanding. And so in the early years, and even including today, they're outstanding because they're under an unusual pressure on this campus from their their friends, and they're not working nearly as hard as they have to work in engineering. But we've had, over the years, some just outstanding young ladies go through our program. It's about 20% of our student body. Realize that we have very few women that transfer in from junior colleges. If they want to go to engineering, they come here as freshmen, and they're good. And in the last 10 years, 6 of the student council presidencies have been held by women.
Across the university?
No, in our college.
In your college, okay.
So the college student council has had a female president 6 out of the last 10 years. And every one of those has gone on to become an outstanding contributor in their companies. One is Ashley Price, for example, that came to Oklahoma State University from Wichita. She could have gone anywhere in the nation. Her father graduated here in chemical engineering and just said, maybe you ought to look at it. And so she came down, and we talked to her about the Scholars Enrichment Program, which was unique at the time. We think even may be unique today. And she was convinced that this is where she wanted to come. She has had a sparkling career at ConocoPhillips. She was a Phillips Scholar, then a graduate in the first Phillips Scholars Program. And remember when she was a senior, we went to see the corporate headquarters of ConocoPhillips, a new company at the time. And Mr. Mulva came in to visit with us, and we were told, do not expect that he will be here more than 20 or 30 minutes at the maximum. At the end of about 45 to 50 minutes, I punched Ashley and I said, why don't you give him our token gift? And so she got up and said, well, Mr. Mulva, we're delighted that you were able to spend some time with us. He said, is this the hook? And she said, she didn't know what that meant, and I didn't focus on that myself. And she pinned on him, or put on him, a stick-on Pistol Pete. And he was a Longhorn. And he very much appreciated that. And 35 or 40 minutes later, he was still talking. He really enjoyed being with the students. So Ashley kind of started in a very unusual way with that company. Today, she's in Australia, managing a very important part of the company over there.
And what about some of your African-American programs? How's your enrollment, your graduation?
Enrollment in the, multicultural engineering program, which includes African-American, Native American, Hispanic American. We do not have large numbers. We're not the same as the national average, but we have more people succeed than some of the other schools. And that's the reason we can be number 1 in Native American graduates. Backing up to that first program, before it was multicultural and it was just, we called it black students only, Pete Lohman's original idea, we had some young people at that time that were pioneering. It was not thought that an African American could succeed in engineering, and we were there to show them they could. And I remember as a student, Sam Combs from Stillwater, Oklahoma. Sam Combs would later become the president of Oklahoma Natural Gas, and now is retired. But Sam has been a very, very important role model for our students, the African American students. And that's true. We have some outstanding role models in Native Americans and Hispanic Americans too.
Kind of, Karl, continuing on the idea of academic enrichment, I know the OSU Scholar Development Recognition Program, it's headed up by Dr. Bob Grauman, has helped prepare students compete successfully for prestigious scholarships, across the country. And several of the successful candidates have been surprise engineering students. How do you feel about the scholarship program, Karl, and how important is it to OSU?
First of all, Bob Grauman has done an outstanding job. I could not be more complimentary of what he's done, as he was asked by President Halligan to head up this activity. Secondly, he's very, very good at identifying students when they come in as freshmen. And he finds a lot of them in our college. And we have had a string of success. 2 Trumans, as I recall, 2 Trumans, 5 or 6 Goldwaters, 1 Marshall, 1 Gates Cambridge, and there were only 30 a year of those, and a number of other special recognitions, such as National Science Foundation graduate fellowships, which are not large in number. We've had 1 or 2 of those every year for the last several years. So our students have been competitive with the best. And here is a university that's not thought of as being as good as Harvard, Yale. But when Harvard, or no, it was Yale, had 2 Gates Cambridge, so did Oklahoma State University. And Ashley Hildebrand set the whole curve. She went on to Cambridge University. Before her, Brian McLaughlin went to Cambridge, got his master's and doctorate. Now is working in the Boston area as an engineer. We've had some just unusually strong students, competitive with the best, and many of those have been in our Scholars Enrichment programs, which started with that granddaddy. It's called Scholars Enrichment Program, now called the CAT Scholars Program. We added the Phillips, we've added the ConocoPhillips, Allen Scholars Program, the Garmin Scholars Program, the Chesapeake Scholars Program. So all of these are very special scholarship and enrichment programs. And we feel very strongly about enrichment outside the classroom. But there's another set of programs that somehow over the last 10 to 15 years, we've been able to nurture and grow. I say we because it's really not the dean, it's really the faculty that have grown these programs over the years by showing an interest, by saying to students, why don't you try it? And those are programs like the concrete canoe, like the mini Baja, like the Formula car, like the tractor pull, quarter scale tractor, like the aircraft design. And now we talk about our students being competitive with the best in national competition for awards like Truman and Goldwater and Marshall and Gates Cambridge, but they've also been unusually competitive in these, what I call team sports, engineering team sports. 10 years ago, they started the Design, Build, Fly competition. This was the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And we had just seen a retirement, and we brought in a new faculty member by the name of Andy Arena. And we started a new idea of how to teach the capstone course in aerospace engineering. And he decided he would tie it into this new competition that no one really knew too much about how it was going to work out. But over the last 10 years, we've had incredible success. And Oklahoma State University is the team to beat. And 5 of those years have been first in the nation. And 5 of those years have been, we've had teams that were first and second or first and third. We've had incredible success. And that is because we hired an outstanding faculty member, and we were able to help him develop and grow, and we were able to support him and able to then create an enterprise there that is, I think, unmatched in terms of the undergraduate experience.
Karl, going back to you a little bit about the scholars, the University Scholar Recognition Development and Recognition Program. Have some of the faculty in the college, have you participated as mentors, research advisors, mock interview participants with the university program?
Absolutely. Every one of our national award winners has had a very strong advisor, a faculty advisor. We've had a number of those in chemical engineering, and I don't think there's a chemical engineering faculty in the nation that can compete in terms of the undergraduate experience and the way in which they help nurture the young people to make it possible for them to win the national awards. We've had them in electrical, we've had them in mechanical, civil. So we've had people distributed throughout our college, students from all the disciplines of our college win these national awards. But every time there's been a strong faculty advisor. Every time there's been a strong effort on the part of Bob Grauman. It took both of these in order for that student to be prepared. I remember when Brian Begley was going in for interview for the Truman Scholarship, and he was very uptight. I recruited Brian to come to Oklahoma State University. He was not going to stay in the state of Oklahoma. I recruited him at the home of a alumnus when we used to have the dinners for juniors and give them an award.
Right.
And the person on the spot, the dean or the vice president was there, was invited in the home of an alumnus. I was invited in the home of alumnus in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And Brian Begley was not a junior, he was a senior. And he was definitely headed outside of state. And he was invited to that informal affair at that home before the dinner that evening, just to meet me. And I was honored by that, but I talked to Brian about Oklahoma State and engineering and the Scholars Enrichment Program, and that turned him around. He came here, of course, in his sophomore year was president of the Student Government Association. By his senior year, he was Truman Scholar, and he was just an outstanding young man, and today he's an outstanding businessman, and he's one of the associates of the college, which means that he's not only part of a strategic advisory committee for the college, but he's a donor, because you have to be a donor before you get on that committee.
Karl, you've talked a little bit about some of the deans you work with. I guess as a student, even you were maybe for a couple of years under Dean Stapley, but that would, as a student, but could you speak to, I guess it'd be, of course, Pete Lohman, Ken McCollum, you.R. Stapley would be the three deans. Could you just share a little bit of insight? You talked particularly about Pete and about his visions and things. Could you just share a little bit about those three individuals and about their personalities and what some of their contributions to the college from your perspective?
Dean Stapley was a very distinguished person, and I didn't have a lot of interaction with him, but he was someone that I was almost in awe with him, because he was so distinguished and so even in the way he did things. Dean Stapley started the Hall of Fame for the college in 1954. And I've been a benefactor of his having done that ever since that time, because I was able to carry that through. We've had 86 inductees since that time, I believe. So I had a great regard for him. He hired Pete Lohman as vice dean, it was called at that time. Not dean of vice, but vice dean. And then I really got to know Pete Lohman better, because I could approach him easier. I didn't feel comfortable in going to see the dean, but I had an opportunity to see the vice dean. So I went in to see him, and we were having an engineering open house every year, and it was kind of a fun and games thing for high school kids to come in. And it was languishing, it wasn't going well. So I went in and proposed to him a totally new idea. And he liked it, and we implemented it. And it ran for several years before it too languished, and we had to do something different. But I grew up with Pete Lohman in a way, and that's the reason I still consider him a dominant player in my professional development. But then when he retired, Ken McCollum became dean. And Ken McCollum was an excellent dean. But again, like Pete Lohman, could be tough, although he was a little more like Stapley, and as being a little less seen, he didn't look like he was tough, but he could be tough. But he was very even, he was a very good listener. He was an excellent mentor in the sense of looking at the professional environment outside the university. And he learned some of that from Pete Lohman, as I did. But he extended that further, and he saw the opportunity for us to develop a professional program, which we had started with Lohman, but we took it another level under Ken McCollum. So when I was ready to step back on the faculty, Ken McCollum announced his retirement, and it caught everybody by surprise, because I thought he would probably be a dean for another few years, and I'd be back on the faculty, and I just enjoyed seeing him as dean. But when he announced retirement, that's when I reluctantly applied for the dean's job. But I had a great relationship with Ken McCollum, and as I did with Pete Loman.
You alluded to a couple presidents earlier. You served under several presidents in your time at Oklahoma State. Is there something you can pick out? I mean, you talked about a couple presidents earlier, John, for example. But just some thoughts about Iran. And I know you risk leaving some of your comments, but just there's some thoughts on presidents that you served under and other university administrators, provost, vice presidents that you recall that you would want to lift up.
Of course, Oliver Wilhelm was president when I was a student. And it was later that I've got a senior moment here, who was the president for several years, that died about 3 years ago.
Bob Comm.
Bob Comm was president when I became a department head. And he was one of the most distinguished persons I had met at Oklahoma State at that time. He was very well educated, obviously. He was very interested in students. He was very interested in seeing our departments grow. I remember his coming to the meeting of the deans with our Dean Lohman chair. We all made a short presentation, who we were. And by the way, Larry Boger repeated that. He did the same thing. But I was very, very impressed that Bob Comm was able to and willing to come down to that level and listen at the department level and make very, very good comments. Well, have you tried this? Have you considered that? Could I help you in this area? So he was, I thought, just a marvelous representative of Oklahoma State University. And to his, until he died, I still had many occasions that I saw Bob Comm. And I saw him walking across the campus one day from Pinehurst to Student Union, and he had just written his last book. And he stopped and he said, "Karl, I want to tell you about my last book." And he did it with a great deal of enthusiasm. And that was Bob Comm. Larry Boger hired me. Larry Boger, of course, came from Michigan State. He came from another land-grant school. And so unlike Bob Comm had come from Drake, I think it was, where he was before he came here. I'm a little hazy on that now.
Texas A&M, I think, wasn't it?
Texas A&M. He had graduated from Drake. He had somehow connived.
Drake and then A&M,
Oh, yeah.
Dean of Students.
Okay, that's right. Then he came here as president.
My dean.
He was your dean. Dean of Arts and Sciences and then president. Larry Boger was, I think, a very, very special person to me, too. He hired me. That makes him kind of special. But Larry Boger had a meeting with the deans twice per month. And one of those meetings was an agenda meeting. So we had to cover certain things, and we did that. It wasn't minutia. It was important things. But then one meeting a month was just open for discussion. And he would tell us what was happening from his viewpoint in Oklahoma City, in state regents, and in the legislature, and what we should be thinking about and getting ready for. We had some austere years there. When he hired me in January of 1986, he said, "Karl, anybody right now is going to be successful as a dean. You're going to look good." And I didn't know what that meant, but on sometime in mid-March, we got a 16% cut retroactive at the beginning of the year. And that was the most difficult time I've ever had as dean. But Larry Boger over the years was just a superb listener. We had an administrative group meeting once a semester, and all the major players on the campus, athletic director and the vice presidents and the deans and so forth were there. And he would open the meeting with about a 3 or 4 minute statement and then never say anything until the very end. He would close the meeting. "This is what I heard today. This is what I think we ought to be prepared to do." And so I was always very impressed with him as a listener. Uh, I was on the search committee. Oh, excuse me, John Campbell. John Campbell was one of, I think, 8 candidates that we interviewed on this campus. And they were all done in a 3-day period. And it was a marvelous management technique that was used to keep them from running into each other. John, of course, was selected from that search. And immediately John became a friend of mine professionally, because he said, I've traveled the state for the last month. It was the first thing he did. He told the faculty in a general faculty meeting that was well attended in the auditorium. And he said, people are hurting in Oklahoma. They need our help. And we need to reach out and help them. And that impressed me very much. He said, I'm going to count on the College of Business and the College of Engineering to lead the way. Now, he was an ag dean at Illinois, and so that surprised everybody, including me. But over the years, John and I worked extremely close together, and he too had a lot of interaction with him. He didn't have the same meetings with the deans that Larry Boger did, and I regretted that some, but he had other ways in which he interacted with us. And John Campbell is my hero, because we wouldn't have the Advanced Technology Research Center on this campus had it not been for John Campbell. There was a state bond issue, and John Campbell liked my presentation I made to the Regents, which is another story. And he said, I'd like to help you, and he gave us the largest piece of that bond issue, $12.5 million. Then he traveled to Washington with me to talk to Wes Watkins when he was in the Congress, who's another hero, about the Advanced Technology Research Center concept at Oklahoma State University, which was balanced between research and outreach, and we were going to help in economic development. And that was a commitment we made very early on. And Wes liked it, and we were able to get $8 million from the federal government. And since we got that, the DOE, from the Department of Energy, DOE office in Chicago took over the management. And we didn't have enough money to build that building. So we had to raise money. And a number of people helped me, but we raised the money and were able to build a $34 million building. And it's something I'm very proud of, because it was opened in 1993 as the Advanced Technology Research Center. And I really believe that 50 years from now, it'll still be an Advanced Technology Research Center. So building infrastructure has been a very important part of my commitment and belief. Building the building in Tulsa, the Helmrich Center, very similar building to the one we have on this campus, but with a more focused research commitment has also been a commitment. And then I built a couple other smaller buildings. So building infrastructure is something that's going to last 50 years, maybe even 100 years. And so I feel very, very proud of that. Next president, Jim Halligan. Jim Halligan came in, and he'd been here 1 week or so, and he had a meeting with the deans. And he went around the table and he asked each dean, what are you doing at the freshman level? And each dean said, we have this course, we're doing the following, or this one dean said, we're just putting in a new course to do the following. And I was the last one. Came around to me and I said, well, Mr. President, I'm sorry to say that we have taken out an introduction to engineering course that was freshman orientation. It just was not going well. He said, well, Karl, it would please me very much if you would put back in a course for entering freshmen. So I went back and talked to the department head and I said, the president has spoken. And so that started what we now have is what I would prefer to call not orientation, not a freshman engineering class, but a freshman experience. Because we have 25 of our very best faculty members, each with a team of 18 to 20 maximum. And I have had one since the beginning, 12 years ago. An idea of Timothy Green, who's my associate dean for research at the time. And how can we bring some excitement into the freshman experience? And how can we change the focus from what it was when I was a student for many years thereafter, focused on lack of success? How can we focus on success? You know, it's well known that for many years in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even the 70s, that the engineering orientation class was told, look to your left and look to your right, only one of you will graduate. And so we started a program 12 years ago that said, we want to help you be successful. And since I'm the dean, I take the scholars. I have a lot of fun doing it.
That's great. Karl, in your leadership, and you spoke to us earlier about working with the communities and working with alumni and the external constituencies. The engineering college has been really, at least from my perspective, actively engaged with alumni as much as any college on campus, maybe more. Can you share a little about your philosophy of alumni relations and mention some of your college activities with alumni?
You know, I think one of the things that we often forget is that retired faculty are still faculty. I learned that from Larry Boger. And I look at alumni very much the same way. Alumni are still part of us. They need to be part of us. And you did an absolutely marvelous job of creating that awareness and building programs. And I could only pick up on that and say, you know, how can we apply it at our college level? So alumni activities have been very, very important part of our college life since I became dean. I have had a lot of alumni meetings. I started the CAT Scholars Program, CAT Associates Program to bring more of our alumni in that could focus their attention on helping the college and helping the university. And I think some have done both. Wayne Allen, for example, chaired the first comprehensive campaign for Oklahoma State University, and now he's chairing the campaign committee for the College of Engineering, Architecture, and Technology. And I met him for lunch last week and talked about our upcoming meeting. But alumni are absolutely vital to the university. Texas A&M is a good example where the spirit never leaves. It's always there. And we've come a long way since I've been at Oklahoma State, since I've been department head or dean, in kindling that fire. And I think the homecoming celebration is a good example of how we've been able to kindle the fire among our alumni. And I have no benchmarking with other universities of our type, except for Texas A&M. And I know the spirit continues to be very, very high, and there's a good reason there. There's a unique reason there. But I think we have done a marvelous job. And I felt like at the college level, we've got to take full advantage. So we've had alumni help us recruit. I go to Houston every year to one of my former students, Robert Castleman. We have an event in his home, and our recruiting coordinator in the Houston area brings in 10 or 15 potential students that have never even thought about it. Some of them haven't even heard of Oklahoma State University. And I have a chance to talk to them about our values, about those things which we think we have some uniqueness in, and those things that will add value to their life if they come our way. So alumni help us in so many ways. I have about 120 people that qualified for our CAT Associates based on a donation program. I learned from Bob Sandmeyer. Bob Sandmeyer once told me that a lot of people like to give me advice, and I decided I would let them pay for it, giving me advice. So he started the first associate program, and I started the second one on this campus. And so I invite people who've made a significant donation to the college to be part of my strategic advisory committee. And we have about 50 people that are very, very active. And Wayne Allen is one of those. Cal Vogt in Tulsa is one of those. There are just a number of people that put a lot of energy and time into helping college. They're mostly alumni.
Your college alumni association has reached out to the younger alumni and
Yes.
other times in the
Yes,
past.
been two two very interesting things happened just last year, or 2 years ago. The young alumni at ConocoPhillips decided they wanted to give something back to the college, but they couldn't do it in large amounts of dollars. So they formed a alumni group with ConocoPhillips, and they started an endowment for scholarships. And the young alumni at ExxonMobil said, we're not going to be beaten by them. So they started one too. And so I think that starts with kindling a flame when they're still students. And when the president or director of, I guess it's president of the Alumni Association that speaks to the students at graduation. And most things at graduation are to be endured. I think there's a element there of, yes, I did gain a lot here, and I should someday give something back. And it's just delightful to me to see some of our youngest alumni give something back.
You've been, as we talked about 24 years as dean. Looking back on your tenure, can you share, we talked about it in your department, but in the college, we asked this question earlier, but give you a chance to think about it again. Any milestones you talked about, facilities, we've talked about programs, enrichment. Is there anything we've left out in that area that you look back on and reflect with pride that's happened or occurred in that?
Well, I think there are several things. First, the growth of our research program has been excellent for our size college, for our size faculty. The growth of our private giving has been almost exponential. And then building facilities has been I think a major milestone for the college. The Advanced Technology Research Center on this campus, the Hornick Center on the OSU Tulsa campus, the new architecture building, and all of these I put a lot of energy into, but so did a lot of other people. But we built a new fire protection and safety engineering technology building, laboratory building. We renovated a part of Cordell Hall that actually started under Ken McCullum, and I kind of finished off the project. So I've been involved a lot in those activities. I've provided some direction, maybe sometimes over controlling, but we got there. But that's a marvelous, from my standpoint, a marvelous legacy of these times. Not just my legacy, but those of the people I've worked with. John Campbell, Jim Halligan, were all major players in helping us get those new facilities. The enrichment programs for students, I think, continue to be as good as anything in the nation. And they may be somewhat unique, and they've made a difference. You're talking about alumni earlier. We have alumni from those programs that remember us well, that stay in contact because of the experience they had. For 16 years, I've planned and taught a course to get students ready for a trip to Japan. And these are Allen Scholars, Chesapeake Scholars, and CEAT Scholars. And there'll be about 18 of them go each year. And for the first 12 years, I led it myself. I put about a month of my time into teaching the class, getting them ready, helping them understand the culture, helping them understand the language a little bit, meet some Japanese students on this campus, understand the kind of companies we're going to visit, that are world-leading companies, understand how they should conduct themselves in these very special places because we're guests. And so I've done that for 16 years, but for the first 12 years, I also took them myself to Japan. And then the 13th year, I had open heart surgery. And I had a bypass surgery. And so that year, I planned the trip a lot better because I was here. And I was working on my computer the next day after I had my surgery. But I was getting ready for those students to go. And then I decided it's time for someone else to lead it. But I prepared the students to go, and I make all the arrangements, and I've done that for 16 years now. And one of the young people that came back this year, when I met them in Tulsa, when they arrived from Tokyo, was Mark Nelson, who's an Allen Scholar, and a young man that I really like to interact with. About once every 3 or 4 weeks, he'll come in and we'll spend an hour just talking. He takes about 22 to 23 hours coursework a semester. He's now running cross country. He's an Allen Scholar. He's just an outstanding young man, an outstanding musician, piano player, and we've used his talent at our Hall of Fame dinners along with Renee Hale for the last 5 years or so. And Mark pulled me off the side after the trip to Japan and said, Dean Reid, I want you to know, everyone else is gone. I want you to know that this time in Japan was a life-changing experience for me. And I said, Mark, that thrills me to hear you say that, but I don't understand it. You spent 2 summers in the Soviet Union on your own, living on the economy, learning the language. He's also has a Russian minor. And I said, you've been in one of the best high schools in the nation, Phillips Exeter Cadet, and you've been exposed to a lot of things. How could you say that this 2 weeks in Japan was a life-changing experience? And he looked at me and he said, 2 weeks in Japan was a life-changing experience. And I said, well, let's talk later. And he'll, as soon as he gets back to the campus, he'll probably be by my office and we'll talk again. And I'm still wondering, how could it have been?
Karl, changing the conversation direction just a little bit toward gender. How has engineering and engineering education changed over the last, well, say 50 years since you were a student? What have been the major evolution and changes in it? Then I'm going to follow with the question about where do you think maybe it's going in the future. But right now, the last 30, 40, 50 years, how's it changed? In what ways?
Enormous change. I was asked to speak at a Engineers Day dinner at a company in Oklahoma, about 150 people there. They'd spent the day sharing best practices among themselves. And a vice president of the company, who's a member of our Hall of Fame, asked me to speak. And he said, well, now Karl, I don't want to guide you too much in what you select, but could you say something about how the academic world keeps up with a rapid change in the industry? And I came back and I was really challenged by that. And I developed a message to those engineers that, a lot of change has occurred in industry. And you know it well. But at least that much change has occurred in the academic world as well. Let me tell you where. And I held up a chip. It was mounted in a piece of plastic. I still have it on my desk. And I said, when I was a student, we used tubes this big for one thing. And now this chip has 450,000 things on it that do more than that one tube did. This has been an enormous change. And I pointed to several other technological changes that were enormous, like imaging equipment, for example, used in the hospital and diagnostics. But then I talked about some of the details, not a lot, but a little bit of the details. For example, I said to them, when I was a student, we studied what many people call handbook engineering. We had a problem, we found the formula, we put the numbers in, and we got an answer. And sometimes it was a little more sophisticated than that, but not a lot. And the formulas we were putting numbers into were formulas that have been developed based on a lot of experimentation, a lot of data. They were not first principles formulas. Let me explain what first principles means. All of you took coursework that may have involved Newton's laws. Those are first principles. They changed, but they haven't yet. They're still first principles. Some of you studied thermodynamics or some other course like that, and you learned about the first law of thermodynamics, and the second law, and the third law. Yeah. Third law says you can't get something for nothing. You learned about the energy equation. These are all first principles. When I was a student, and for many years thereafter, we didn't even think in terms of those principles. Today, we don't plug numbers into a formula. We develop the formula based on first principles. That's an enormous change. When I went to MIT, I was a good handbook engineer. But MIT was a little ahead of Oklahoma State at that time. And they had already moved into this arena. And so my first year was really tough. I had to work extremely hard in order to understand what first principles really meant. So that's the enormous change. And that's why we've been able to develop some unusual things as engineers, how we've been able to contribute to quality of life, because we can do it based on not supposition and a lot of data, but we can base it on first principles. Not only that, but this took a lot of time to develop those empirical formulas. And we did a lot of experimentation. It's very costly. Today, we don't do nearly as much experimentation because we're using the first principles approach. So that was an interesting experience for me. What has changed over the years is not only things I've indicated there, the enormous change in the way in which we solve problems, but if you look at what has happened in technology in the last 20 years, or last 100 years would be better, it's enormous. It's been exponential in terms of development. In 1990, the National Academy of Engineering decided that they would engage the public being mainly engineers in this country, in developing the top 20 list of engineering achievements. Many people put input in. The deans of engineering put input in, and individuals all over the country put input. Then there was a blue ribbon committee, people, members of the National Academy, the highest honor paid to an engineer in the country, of all ages, most of them fairly mature people that had been retired for several years, and they came down to the top 20. But when they were doing this, one of the members who I knew quite well, an electrical engineer, said, I was absolutely convinced that the internet was the most important engineering achievement. I'm 55 years old, and the 80-year-old member of the National Academy looked at me and said, you must be kidding. Not even half the people in this country have ever even been on the internet. That could not be number one. He said, so I backed away and let it kind of develop. And then I can tell you, and I'm leading to a point to answer your question, the top 20, number one was electrification. That happened a long time ago. Number two was water purification. That happened a long time ago and sets this country apart from most of the rest of the world. And had it not been for electrification, we wouldn't have computers. We wouldn't have internet. We wouldn't have imaging equipment in the hospital or diagnostics. If you look at what happened after those, both of those things made a major difference in this country. And by the way, the top 20 were selected based on a criteria. What has had the most impact on our quality of life? And if you look at water or electrification, and water purification certainly has. But then you've got the telephone, you've got the automobile, you've got a lot of things. Now, if you look at what's happened in technology in the last 100 years, there's been an exponential increase in the development, in the sophistication, and the impact on our quality of life. The impact on my quality of life from engineers and scientists when I was growing up was very, very good. But I hope today the impact is very much greater. And you look around you and you see everything that was designed or built or conceived by someone who had a strong science and mathematics interest. And it's not just engineers, there's a lot of people involved. And then someone has to take it to the business place. And so over the years, I've seen much more of a integration of talents in the various colleges on this campus. We have teams of faculty work very much with teams in physics, chemistry, and computer science. We have teams that work very much with the Spear School of Business. Our most active engagement is with the College of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources. We have some outreach programs that we share that are just outstanding, that are making a difference in the quality of life in the state. So what I see has happened in my 20 years as dean is an almost exponential increase in the impact that engineers and scientists and other people that are able to take ideas to the business place well have had on quality of life of people in this nation. And my concern is, as we look forward to the future, we may lose a little bit of that.
Karl, let me tag on that, this question. We talked a little bit about the land grant philosophy earlier. Throughout its history, what have been the traditional and continuing strengths of the College of Engineering, Architecture, and Technology? What are those fundamental strengths that you think they've built on?
It's our outreach program we used to call Extension, but a former president changed that title. We've had many changes over the last 35, 40 years, or say 45 since I've been here that long. When I was a student, and for some years thereafter, we had an engineering experiment station in the college. Texas A&M still has an engineering experiment station. So does Kansas State. But for some reason, our leadership decided we would drop that. And it evolved in dropping. It evolved from doing less and less till the time when it was really not feasible anymore. And I think that was an unfortunate thing to happen. I'm not sure how it happened, but it was unfortunate. But we replaced it with some things that are very, very good. Outreach took on new dimensions. And as the experiment station was engaged with industry, but not really very strong compared to today, we developed and carried through that philosophy of strong engagement with industry. We started the Web Handling Center with 15 sponsors, name brands, DuPont, Eastman Kodak, Polaroid, 3M, and they came here because we had something unique to offer. Of course, the Web Handling Center is one of a kind in the world. But outreach in experiment station days became strong interactions with industry through several centers we have in our college. And I think we're very, very good in that business.
The Center for Local Government Technology.
Center for Local Government Technology is an outreach program. Fire Protection Publications is an outreach program. It's an outreach program that not only touches every state in this country, but 35 other countries. So I said a third of our business is outreach. And that really doesn't count the outreach that comes out of research. We kind of put that research, like Web Handling, for example. So outreach has changed its picture a great deal over the years. But along this way, we've also developed continuing education for engineers. And as a very strong priority of the college, we have a commitment to graduates to help them go to the next level, master's degree, but perhaps, or help them to go to a level of understanding that's going to help them in their job. So we came up with the idea, and it was the first. There are other people who have adopted the same idea now, of a Master of Science in Engineering and Technology Management. Ken Case, member of the National Academy of Engineering from our faculty, was the first director of that. I twisted his arm pretty hard to take on that role, but he did an absolutely marvelous job. And I helped him some in meeting some of the captains of industry. And he met the middle level management. He met the potential students. And we've designed a program with the help of all three of those groups that is, I think, we're a country leading, national leading, maybe international leading program. We have students in 16 states. We have students in Afghanistan and Iraq that are in the military. We have about 200 students per year in that program. That's outreach. That's taking what we develop on this campus, we used to call extension, to a public, to a group of people who are busy working professionals who could not return to the campus for a master's degree. And so I think we do that exceptionally well. At any one time, any one semester, we have about 600 students studying at distance from our programs.
Karl, can you talk just briefly about the kind of the unique organizational structure of the college? I mean, it encompasses different academic units than probably a lot of engineering schools.
Well, first of all, we are an outgrowth of change of title many times, from the Oklahoma Institute of Technology to today's College of Engineering, Architecture, and Technology. One time it's called Division of. But the college has three major curricular areas, and they're all quite different. And that's one of my challenges, is one of my opportunities, and one of the really nice parts of the college, because this is, I think, the only college of its type in the nation. So where you have architecture with architectural engineering, which is uniquely placed there, which is one of the only ones. We have the Division of Engineering Technology with 4 major departments, with one program which is the only one of its kind in the nation. It's fire protection and safety technology, with a construction engineering program that's highly valued by the industry and well supported with private gifts from the industry. And then the mechanical and electrical engineering technology that really complement the electrical and mechanical engineering programs in the rest of the college, the engineering programs. We call them schools in engineering. I'm not sure what the history there is, but maybe it's because Purdue called them schools, that we do too. But it's a unique organization. But there's another facet that relates to your question, and that is Pete Lohman taught me the value of pushing management decisions down. When I was department head, I knew that I had a lot of opportunity to do what I thought was best for the department, up to a point, and I'd fall off the precipice if I made a bad decision. I really liked that. I really thought I matured rapidly as a manager in that regard. And by the way, I don't consider myself an administrator. I consider myself a manager. Likewise for all of our management team, all of our department heads. But we have a strong department head system. A lot of places, even some places on this campus, elect a department head every 3 years.
Chairman.
A chairman. And a chairman does not have the opportunity to grow the department like a head, in my opinion. And so I have a head that's been a head almost as long as I've been dean, that I recruited and hired to replace me. And he's done an absolutely super job, and he's one of the strongest department heads on this campus. Our management team is an extremely strong group of individuals. So I not only can entrust in them to manage the departments well, but the way I budget is I give them a certain amount of dollars from each of the state accounts and hold them accountable for spending those. And how they distribute those funds, how they organize themselves is their business. And they're able to do it much better than I can because they're closer to the action. So we are a strong department head system, and I think that's to our advantage compared to a lot of other institutions.
Karl, we talked a little bit about fundraising. 1/3 of your time now, you know, is one of those things they didn't tell you when they hired you for dean.
That's right. Wasn't in my job description.
That's right. What do you think about OSU's $1 billion? I can hardly say that word. $1 billion campaign, you know, branding success. What do you think about the campaign? And kind of following question is, what are some of the priorities you know, for engineering under that campaign?
Well, when I first heard that the president would like to announce a $1 billion campaign, I was kind of overwhelmed, as I think. But one of the very strong attributes of Vern Target's is that he thinks big, and he puts programs in place to help us get there. I think he catalyzes all of us to say we can be part of something very, very special. But why is he doing it? Is because it's absolutely vital to the long-term success of this university. And it's not based on needs. In fact, in fundraising, I abhor the use of the word need. I like to think in terms of opportunity. I like to talk to donors about, if you are able to commit $50,000 or $100,000 or $1 million, this is what you can make happen. That wouldn't happen otherwise. One of my management team members put a little table tent in front of all of our department heads one day, and I didn't know he was going to do this. But it said, people do not give to needy institutions. They give to good ideas. So all of our campaign in the first round, where Jack Zink was the alumni chairman, and the current campaign is geared around putting creative ideas in front of people who have an interest in possibly considering them. And in many cases, we've seen people stretch much farther than you ever would have guessed they would. One of my fundraising colleagues working on behalf of the college and I were visiting with an alumnus of only 3 years, not a graduate, but alumnus. I like that. And his wife over lunch, and we said, we're going to do this very special project, and we would like very much for you to be part of it.
We were talking about your fundraising story, about the couple you worked on for 3 years.
We had lunch with the alumnus, not a graduate, and his wife, an alumnus who did graduate from OSU. The gentleman graduated from another institution. And we presented a case to them. And we had previously sent them a proposal, but they hadn't really reacted. And we presented a case to them and said, this is the difference you can make. This is not we didn't talk about need, we talked about the difference they can make. We parted. George Wint and I went back to our hotel to check out after lunch. And he got a call within 20 minutes of the time we left the couple. And they said, we'd like to make this donation. That was an unusually satisfying situation. But it taught me a strong lesson too, that I think undergirds our entire fundraising campaign now. And that is, you've got to find people that have the capacity, surely, that's necessary, but you also have to find people that are willing to stretch a little bit and that they really want to be part of making something good happen. And some of them relate to students very well, so scholarships are very, very attractive. Most of our older alumni do not really relate to fellowships, but it's the Achilles heel of our research program in virtually every college on the campus. Most of them don't relate to endowed professorships and chairs. So we have to make that case for why it's important, not why it's a need, but why it's important for the long term of excellence of the college and how they can make a difference if they establish an endowment, or how they can make a difference if they establish a scholarship program.
Carl, we were talking about the facilities earlier. Do you have any facilities built into your fundraising goals?
Yes. We've built a lot of facilities in the last 20 years, and I'm very proud of that. And I think our faculty are very pleased with that as well. But we have one active project, and we have one major unmet need. And I'm not sure that I see the light at the end of the tunnel, but both have to be done. First one is a structures research laboratory. And we have some very outstanding faculty members in the structures area, in civil engineering, and in mechanical engineering. And we promised 2 of those that we'd have a structure laboratory when we hired them several years ago. And it looked like we were going to make it. And it was going to be a turnkey and just given to us. But that didn't happen. And we understand why. There's good reasons behind it. But that's an unmet need that we are still focusing on strongly to meet. And that would be about a $4 million building on a site where we have additional research buildings. The big unmet need is civil engineering laboratories. They're really in bad shape. And plus, we do not have really a first-class building, really even an adequate building for electrical engineering. We have lost some space in another place. We're going to lose space in Cordell Hall these days. And so we need very badly to build a high-rise building, 5-story building with a full basement on the site of the current 1-story civil engineering laboratories that are dilapidated. And it's a very prominent place on the campus. 50,000 people come to a football game and see that old building there. But more importantly, it's essential to the future of this college in 2 ways. First, we will help provide good office facilities and very much better laboratory facilities for 2 of our departments that really do not have adequate facilities today. And this is largely an impact on the undergraduate experience, a little bit on the graduate experience. It will also allow us to build a completely sheltered nanotechnology laboratory that we need to do. We need to get it away from the stadium area. So that's one of the reasons why we need to build that building. The second reason we need relates to the shortage of engineers. We graduate 65,000 PS degrees each year in engineering, in all fields of engineering.
Yes.
In the US, there are 65,000 PS degree graduates in all fields of engineering combined. There are about 80,000 PS graduates in psychology, one field of social science. Something is unbalanced there. In the last 20 years, interest in the sciences, mathematics, and engineering have dropped. Computer science and as well. And those things in the social sciences have risen. I appreciate the social sciences. I think they're important. But I think as a nation, we're really losing ground fast. Japan graduates twice as many engineers as we do each year at the PS level, and they have less than half the population. That's a striking number, striking fact. Korea, a country of only 40 million people, and we're what, more than 300 million people. Korea graduates half as many engineers as we do. That's why Samsung, that's why Mitsubishi, that's why countries in the Asia Pacific area are doing so well. Why we lost the consumer electronics market to Japan? Because we do not have the focus on science and technology. And it starts at the lowest level in K through 12. It starts with things like teachers that are not really well prepared for that business. And there are a lot of reasons why that's not a criticism, it's just a fact. It starts with parents. When Johnny comes in and says, I can't understand this mathematics or what it's all about, or why it's important. And the father and mother says, well, I had trouble too. Don't worry too much about it. And so there's a lot of inhibitors along the way. And we've learned quite a bit about that. And we put, as a nation, hundreds of millions of dollars to try to solve the K through 12 math and science education problem, trying to solve the problem of encouraging more young people to consider mathematics, science in the K through 12 system. And it's important in microbiology. It's important in physics and chemistry and master of information systems. All of these programs require mathematics as they do all the engineering programs. And somehow we're just not doing it. As a nation, we do not score well in the international tests. We're near the top at the 4th grade, we've dropped to the middle at the 8th grade, and we're near the bottom of the 50 countries where the measurement's made. And some of the countries we don't want to be compared with, but they're much better than we are in mathematics and in science education. So something has to change there. So one of the things that we've done as a college, I've done personally, put a lot of energy into, are K through 12 oriented programs where we can make a difference. And we became the affiliate university for Project Lead the Way, a national program with engineering, pre-engineering courses in the high schools. And we're a partner with Career Tech, with the public school system. And our part of the partnership is that we train the teachers to teach the courses that are pre-engineering courses. And in the last 6 years, we've gone from 0 students in the pre-engineering programs to more than 1,250. We're getting more of those students into our engineering programs today, as is University of Oklahoma, as is University of Central Oklahoma. This is a wonderful thing. Second program is FIRST Robotics, a national program, in fact, an international program. And we had no activity in Oklahoma except in one high school. And that teacher called me, unsolicited. She didn't know me, I didn't know her. And she said, I'm calling you to tell you how you can help me. And that led to our heavy involvement with FIRST Robotics.
I think yeah, in Ponca City, was it?
Ponca City.
Yeah.
Wonderful young lady that's making a difference in her high school. She's a biology teacher. In fact, our joke is she's only a biology teacher, but she's won, her teams have won more championships in FIRST Robotics than most teams in the nation. More trophies, I should say. But that has become a very strong element. And Burns Hargis, our president, has been a major player. He helped us get the first regional competition in Oklahoma, which made it possible for our teams to come to do their competition in Oklahoma rather than having to go to Kansas City or Houston or someplace else at a high cost. So with help from the legislature and with help from alumni of our college, who I've catalyzed to help understand why we need their help. And our management team has been very, very active and supportive in this as well. And we have several faculty members that teach courses in areas that are important to students that look at us and think they might come here that have been in these FIRST Robotics programs. But it's been a marvelous thing. We're seeing significant increases in our enrollment. Last year in new freshmen, we had a 13.5% increase. And that has never happened in our college. It's never happened in the university. And it comes about as a result of two things. One, we hired a superstar as recruiting coordinator, Catherine Wineland, and we've been a very active player, and we're known all over the state as being the active player in the pre-engineering academies that have Project Lead the Way curriculum and in the FIRST Robotics. We've hosted all of the FIRST Robotics in Oklahoma conferences for teachers, for students. First Saturday in January, there is a grand opening of a new competition for that year. It's different every year, and we've hosted it here every year since we got involved. And so we are the place that's known as interested in the K through 12 student that might be and should be also interested in science and mathematics.
Karl, turn it to a little personal note in our conversation to you. I know you're a modest individual, but can you share some honors and recognition that you received through the years that are special to you?
I think the most important honor that I have received in my entire professional life was being selected as an outstanding teacher. And that is a recognition by the students. That's very, very important. When I came to the university, it was important for me to do a good job in the classroom. It was important to me because the dean said we need to do it to focus on research. And my concern then and my concern today is how do we do that and still keep it balanced? And I think I guess my biggest award has been a reward. It's been a reward for having been able to be at Oklahoma State University and having at least a small role in preparing us for the future. Another award I received, which was kind of out of the blue, was Boss of the Year, I think it was called. My secretary at the time put me up for it. And so I was Boss of the Year in Oklahoma. I was I had 2 awards with Oklahoma Society of Professional Engineers on engineering developments that several others worked with me on. I was outstanding engineer in Oklahoma one year. And those are all very, very important to me. The recognition by the students was the most important.
Carl, a couple that I just mentioned you might follow up on is you're a fellow, and some people understand to be a national fellow, an international fellow is pretty special, a small, select number of people.
About 30 of our faculty members are a fellow in some organization.
You're talking about 2 organizations, is that right?
Well, I'm a fellow in the American Society for Mechanical Engineers, where I put a lot of energy over a number of years, and I benefited greatly from it. And I'm a fellow in the American Society for Engineering Education. And both of those I value very highly.
You have 4 patents, I understand. As a researcher, I could go. I looked at your resume. We could go on for a long time, Carl. But just to
the important thing about the patents is not we didn't make any money on them, but they engaged us in something that was very, very important and very much related to needs, how we can help quality of life, or how we can help technology grow, or whatever, which would then help quality of life. So I enjoyed developing the patents. The first 2 is when I was a graduate student at MIT and worked with Colonel Ellison R. Williams. I think he was an honorary colonel. He was from Mississippi, from Vicksburg, Mississippi, and he came to MIT and started searching around for someone who could work with him on a anti-skid brake control system. And so I worked for several years with him, and we had the first 2 patents that way. And I worked with attorneys in Washington, D.C. who were absolutely top of their field to develop those first 2 patents. And we didn't sell them because there's a lot of resistance in the automotive industry to any new ideas coming in from outside, and for good reasons. And yet our concept eventually came out on automobiles. Not the one precisely that we developed, but very, very close. The second 2 patents were a result of one, the biomedical engineering area. We're working with several of my students, 2 of whom became medical doctors, and working with a student in veterinary medicine who became a anesthesiologist. And we did a marvelous job of getting several programs going, including the measurement of anesthesia gas as it's delivered to the patient. An anesthesiologist has a difficult job. And in the lung ventilator, which even today is better overall than anything on the marketplace. And I still have a kind of a dream of pulling that back out and selling it. The other one was a result of a major contract I had with the U.S. Army, and we developed a mathematical model, computer model for a transmission system, hydraulic transmission system for a tank. And we did a marvelous job. I had several doctoral students working on that, and one of the patents is dealing with that outcome as well. So I had fun doing it. We didn't make any money on it, but I think we made a difference, and it's in the literature for someone else to build on.
Carl is an alumnus of Oklahoma State University, 2-time alumnus, 2 degrees from Oklahoma State University, and lifetime of
No. 1 degree from Oklahoma A&M College.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me, I missed my
1 degree from Oklahoma State University.
Thank you for correcting me. What? We're not talking about engineering. I'm just talking about Oklahoma State University. Generally, what gives you most pride about OSU, about your alma mater?
We talk about how friendly the place is. We talk about how safe the place is. We talk about how beautiful our campus is. And those are all points of pride for me. I'm a dean, have been for a long time. I've had colleagues in other colleges that have come and gone, but it's been a very collegial group. And I think that's a mark of distinction for Oklahoma State University, is that we work well together, we accomplish a lot, we don't talk too much about it, we don't brag about it, but we have a great impact, I think, throughout the campus. I'm very proud of what happens in every college. I like to talk about science being an undergirding part of every college on this campus. If you look at Spear School, it's economics. You look at arts and sciences, there's many areas of science. You look at agriculture, everything is girded in science. So we are the Oklahoma Science University. And being an engineer and building everything I've ever done on science and mathematics, that's a point of great pride. People here are genuine. They're not only friendly, but they not only work well together, but they believe in the mission of Oklahoma State University. And I think that's very, very powerful, because the land grant idea was a marvelous idea. And we are it. We ought to do it well. And I think there's still a lot of exciting things to happen in this university.
Sure.
Obviously, I'm very passionate about Oklahoma State.
As you should be.
I'm very passionate, and I have had many opportunities to go elsewhere. I could have applied for other positions that were open along the way, but I've had a marvelous experience. I love my job. I love my department head job. I love my faculty job. I've stayed here, but I've been in 25 countries. I put a lot of value on study abroad today for our students. I think it's absolutely essential. Across the campus, students ought to go abroad and spend some time. And maybe 2 weeks is not going to be a life-changing experience for everybody, but maybe a month or 2 months or a semester. But it's a very, very vital thing for us to build on this campus. I think we also need to do some things on this campus related to major programs. You know, at one time we had the Laser Research Center. And we need to encourage our faculty and catalyze our faculty and support our faculty to come together and work across boundaries. We do that well as a university, and that's a point of pride. But we could do more. And as a land grant school, we probably need to do more.
Special memories over the years, Oklahoma State University, from undergraduate through, just over the period of 50 years, more than 50 years now, association with Oklahoma State University. What are some special memories that stand out for you?
As an undergraduate, my classmates, and especially my colleagues in Pi Tau Sigma, many of those I still have contact with. So I have a very strong belief that you develop your values about age 10, plus or minus a couple of years, and the only thing that will change those values is something significant. This is not unique to me. I heard a lecture on this many years ago, but I put it to practice. I also think that the contacts you make while you're in college are very, very important. And it's just a very rapid maturing time. It's a wonderful thing for me to see a freshman come in that I know is bright, and to see them go out into a wonderful position, and they're competitive the best. So my special memories from undergraduate days are the people I worked with, and many of whom I still have contact with. And I've asked for money from some of them, and some of them have given. We got a couple of professorships were donations from colleagues of mine. We've got several rooms in the ATRC that are a result of some friends of mine. So those are special memories from undergraduate days. Graduate days at MIT, I guess the two things that stand out the most are, one, the administrative experience that I had that prepared me for a life in many ways. And it wasn't just administrative. I had an unusual academic experience with the master's in the field. The other thing that stands out is that I as a second year doctoral student, and I was naive as they come, and I wrote a abstract for a paper that was accepted in the first international conference on automatic control to be held in Moscow, Russia. And it was accepted. And I had a classmate, another doctoral student that also had a paper that was accepted. So we were delighted. We were in awe of this whole opportunity. There were 8 others from MIT all of the faculty that were going, including Charles Draper, the inventor of the gyro, and the director of of a major laboratory at MIT that was world renowned and had major impact on our military presence. So 2 graduate students and these 8 faculty members going to Moscow, and 2 weeks before we were to leave, Gary Powers was shot down in a spy plane. We had no idea what was going to happen. I was really apprehensive. My advisor, one of the 8 faculty members, and my colleague and I went to London on the cheapest flight we could find. And everybody else went on a 2-week tour. We just took the flight. Then we flew from London to Moscow, and there were only three of us and one other person on the airplane. At that time, it was a prestige flight. And they were just flying 1 day a week, British Airways, and 1 day a week, Airflot. So we were on the British Airways flight. I was very apprehensive. They came around and took all of our personal belongings, our billfold and any papers we had in our pockets. And I was sure that they were going to steal from us. They brought it all back, and I counted every dollar. It was all there. We were on our way to the first international conference, and I've been involved in others since that time. But back to Moscow, we landed in Moscow. We got in a taxi cab. There were no other airplanes at the airport, international airport, than our plane. We got on a taxi cab, and we went into some 15 miles to one of the 7 skyscrapers in Moscow, built during Khrushchev's time. Went into a Hotel Ukrainer. It was only about 20 years old. It looked like it was 120 years old. Very interesting place, a very poor elevator system. But on the way in, I noticed there's something wrong. I could not figure out what was wrong. There were no signs of any kind all the way in. So we get to the hotel, and my colleagues, a couple of faculty members from MIT that were there, said, come and go to the Kremlin Museum with us, which is a marvelous depository of gifts that were exchanged between the royal family in England and the royal family and the czars in Russia. And of course, there were some other countries involved as well. Germany was part of that play, a lot of intermarriage there. And then I was asked, let's go to Gorky Park and see the remains of the airplane and the personal effects of Gary Powers. And we got there, and the line was very, very, very long. But all the Americans were put up to the front of the line. There were kibitzers telling us all the bad things we did. The people that we interacted with during the conference in our field of interest never said anything about any of this. They were the most genuine, warm, interested, engaged people that we'd ever met. We had lunch with them every day. We had 3 days when we gave papers. I gave my paper, and it was translated. So I'd have 2 or 3 lines, and it'd be translated. The translator did a much better job than I did, for sure. Very long session. We flew then, my colleague and I flew to Vienna on an airline, Viennese airline. And we got to Vienna, decided we would go to a concert that was to be held in the Stadthaus, the city hall. And as we went down the street we were told to go, we saw all this crowd over on the right side. And we saw a fellow up on the level of the street, but the crowd was up on the street as well as down below. It turned out it was the Parliament building, Austrian Parliament building. And this fellow looked American, so we stopped and I engaged him and said, what's happening here? Is this where the concert is going to be? Oh no, there's no concert here. Khrushchev is about to arrive. So Khrushchev flew to Vienna the same day that Dick Norwood and I did. And we saw him. His limousine came up and we're standing up. The Life magazine writer was the one that we met. He said, stay right here, you'll see it all. So we stayed there with him, looked over the wall, 20 feet down there, limousine door opens, Khrushchev gets out. He was so close, it was so interesting. And so that was a very interesting period. Get back, and 2 weeks later, my office mate, Tom Sheridan, was still in Russia. He landed in Leningrad, went to a museum where they, two or three stories into the ground, through a tunnel, and where they published the first newspaper to destroy the czars. And came out, and he was accosted on the street by a Russian and holding a newspaper in front of him that said RB-47 shot down. And when he came back, he was still kind of shaken with that. But there's the most interesting series of things happened there where, for every reason, the people in the Soviet Union should have been really upset with us. But on a professional basis, they were not. 30 years later, Bernard and I go to Leningrad, just on the way into Tallinn, Estonia. Estonia was still part of the Soviet Union. There was a Soviet Union. And we took an Aeroflot plane from Leningrad after we had 3 days of look at the city and dismay at how bad the infrastructure was. And the museum, the world famous museum there with no air conditioning and things deteriorating very fast. We flew into Tallinn, went to the first day of the Congress. This was 30 years after it had been in Moscow the first time, where the president was from US, and I studied out of his book, and I got to know him quite well in years later. But 30 years later, we're in Tallinn, Estonia, and we go to the opening session, which is always perfunctory. You get to keep the city, and you get all kinds of, happy to have you here. If you have any questions, ask so-and-so. But the third speaker was the president of Estonia. And we're in the Communist Party headquarters building having this opening session. And Bernalou and I and the wife of a good friend who was giving a paper that afternoon, and he was up in the balcony preparing his paper, not paying attention to what was undoubtedly going to be perfunctory. And the president of Estonia said, and I've got copious notes on this, "We have been oppressed by the Soviet Union for 50 years. We're not going to do that anymore." As far as we know, that was his declaration of independence. The whole current of the conference was talking about that. And the bylaws of this international organization says this is a scientific organization. There shall not be any discussion of political things, but it couldn't be avoided. And right up to the end, and the closing ceremony, which is always full orchestra and wonderful dinner, and the deputy director of the university that was kind of charged of the whole conference told a story about his father, who was Estonian and had been deported to the far reaches of Russia and developed cancer, and they tried very much to get him back, and got him back in time for him to live one day in Estonia, and then he died. Now, he told this story in a Congress, in a closing session of a Congress, that the rest of the story I have to backtrack, and you might be interested in this too. In November of 1989, before the August 1990 Congress, I'm in Vienna, Austria. I'm one of the technical committee chairmen. There were about 8 of us, and there were a couple of other people. We planned the Congress, and I planned the sessions for my committee, and we were there to coordinate everything. The next morning, we worked all day. Next morning, I went down to the lobby, and one of the East Europeans, I was the only American there, one of the East Europeans that I got to know quite well, came up and said, "You probably don't read German, but the paper today has the headlines. The Berlin Wall is down." that was pretty auspicious.
Yeah, mercy.
So the Berlin Wall comes down, and then the Congress, and 6 months later, the Soviet Union collapsed. So I've been blessed by carrying people at Oklahoma A&M College, through Oklahoma State University, and Ernie Fitch being a big impact, to the impact people had on me. Auspicious time at MIT because the major players and all the technologies were there. And this opportunity to start a travel abroad. And I've put a lot of value in travel abroad. It's all been business, except one time. I've had a little pleasure each time, but I'm not a vacation guy, so I tend to mix the business with the pleasure. And I've taken my wife in recent years. So she didn't go to Russia the first time, she went to Estonia the second time, and had a marvelous experience there with a lady who spoke very good English coming to her and saying, "You're from America. I've been charged by the Estonian government to understand how we can develop free enterprise in this country. Would you teach me how to do that?" And there were some other things related to that were just astounding. Estonia at that time had 600,000 Russians, 900,000 Estonians. Very small country. The 600,000 Russians were brought in to upset the balance. And went to the university and visited the automatic control laboratory. And young faculty members said, "Up until this year, we've taught every course in both Estonian and Russian. But we're only teaching in Estonian from this point forward." And I said, kind of naively, "Well, what about the Russians that are in your class?" And he said, "That's their problem." Now, I was to later see the collapse of the Soviet Union, and I didn't realize I was already seeing it. The three Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, declared independence, and they were kind of the beginning of the collapse. And these are very small countries, but very proud people, and people that have the same values I have. And let me tell you one more story about an international experience that I think was kind of life-changing for me. I got a call from a friend who was then on the faculty at Purdue, who had been in a class that I was teaching at MIT. And he said, "I went to India last summer and taught a summer workshop for college teachers from all over India in automatic control. Would you go with me this summer?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm director of graduate studies in mechanical engineering, and we got too many graduate students. We have 150 graduate students and 13 faculty. And I said, we wouldn't have a problem if there weren't so many Indian students. So I'm not sure I'd really want to go." He said, "Karl, I think you'd enjoy this and you'd get benefit from it." And so I decided to go, and there were 80 faculty members from all over the U.S. in science and engineering in India for 5 summers in a row, teaching workshops for college teachers from all over India. It was a joint project between the National Science Foundation here and the Indian Ministry of Education there, funded with USAID funds. So all of our expenses were paid in rupees, but we got a nice stipend as well. Had 30 faculty members from all over India in my workshops. I did it the first summer, and I thought, wow, I think I'll do this again. So I volunteered to do it alone the next summer. And I've been there a few days when I got a call from an Indian student at Mysore University, I think it was. And his name was B.N. Morale. And he said, "I've read some of your papers, and I'd like to come to Oklahoma State and work with you on a doctorate. And so I'd like to come and visit with you." He came 6 hours by train. This was 1970, and it was difficult to travel anywhere in India at that time. And everybody on the train had everything they owned. He spent about an hour and a quarter with me. He said he wanted to come and work with me. He was very, very nice person. I was very impressed with him. But he said, I need some financial support. And I said, "We really don't give financial support to new students from abroad. You'd have to come and prove yourself, and we'd consider you for financial support. That was our method of operation at the time. Today it's quite different. So he left, 6 hours back, and I got to feeling badly and guilty the next day. I said, you know, he really went to a lot of effort to come and see me, and I wasn't very helpful. So it was difficult to do that. I managed to get him on the telephone. And in 1970, that was very difficult in India. So I said, when I get back, I'll check my resources and see if I can make you an offer of a research assistantship. And I did that. B.N. Morale was the one that developed the lung ventilators with me after he finished his doctorate. He's a co-inventor. He was ready to leave, and I talked him into staying for a postdoc. He stayed a second year for a postdoc. That's how we did the ventilator work, for us to have full attention to that one project. And he's getting near the second year, and he said, you know, I really ought to go to work. And I said, I think you should too. So I called a classmate of mine at Halliburton Mechanical Research and Development Laboratory in Duncan, Oklahoma. And I said, I've got a deal for you. I've got a postdoc student that did a doctorate with me that's good with his hands and he's good with his head. He can make money for you. And the answer was, we don't hire PhDs. I said, I'll call you next week and see if you change your mind. I called him back. He said, Karl, I'm sorry, we just don't feel like MS or PhDs are important in our organization. I said, but you're mechanical research and development. He said, I know it, but we still take a BS and do all we need to do. I said, are you against master's people? He said, no, but we don't really need them. I said, is that because you don't have a master's degree? I really irritated him. And so I said, look, I'll call you again next week and have your manager on the phone. Let's talk about this one more time. So the next week, his manager was on the phone. I said, his name was Mac. I said, Mac, here's the deal. He'll make money for you. So they said reluctantly, well, we'll take him on. But they really did not think they were doing the right thing. They did it as a favor to me. So he went in and he completely transformed their major business. These 20,000 pounds per square inch pumps that pump fluid into the ground. He put in all new control systems and completely changed the way in which they behave. Time went on. He calls me one day and says, would you buy some tickets, pancake tickets from me? I'm in the JCs. And I said, well, only if you will buy, what were we selling in the Exchange Club?
Something all the time.
It was a book for celebrating a centennial or something like that. I said, only if you'll buy this book. So we exchanged those. A few years later, he calls me and I said, where are you? And he said, I'm in The Hague. What are you doing in The Hague? And he said, I'm establishing a new office for Halliburton. I said, well, but you're supposed to be in R&D. He said, if I want to get anywhere in this business, I need to know something more about the business. So I'm setting up an application office for Halliburton. And I said, why'd you call? He said, I wanted to know how the Cowboys did against the Sooners. And that was the time when Barry Switzer said, kick it away. And the kicker didn't get the message, and he kicked it into the helmet of Blair, bounced back, and they ended up winning the game. Anyway, 3 or 4 years later, he calls me. How did Cowboys do? I said, well, they lost again. I said, where are you? And he said, I'm in The Hague. No, I'm in Dubai. So what are you doing in Dubai? He said, I'm setting up an application engineering office in Dubai. You know where the headquarters of Halliburton is today? Dubai.
Really?
He was the first one there. And so a couple of years go by, and he comes back to Duncan. He's in mechanical research and development, where I thought he belonged. And he calls me one day and he says, I'm going to the field. I said, you can't go to the field. You're a PhD. They take BS people in the field. And I said, you need to be over here. You're contributing at a much higher level. He said, no, if I ever want to go any place in this country, I got to know something about the business. So he does 3 years in the field, PhD, comes back to MRD, Mechanical Research Development. I worked with the vice president there to start a distance education program to deliver master's degrees in mechanical, electrical, and chemical engineering to employees there at the center. It was important to them because it was part of their retention program. They hire someone from Pennsylvania, and the only way they can keep them here is to let them do a master's degree. And so that was true even from Oklahoma. Well, I get word one day after we developed the program that vice president was fired. So were about 10 other vice presidents. I get a call after it hits the news from Dean Morale. And he says, I got a new job. And I said, assuming he probably got axed too at Helmer. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm staying here. Well, what's your new job? He said, I'm vice president of technology. Later, he brought a check for a good amount of money for one of the rooms in the Advanced Technology Research Center. He's a member of our associates. He's a very good friend. So anyway.
Karl, let me kind of close with this question, and think about it. This is a sincere question. How do you hope people remember Karl Reid?
That's a real tough question. Because I'm not really driven by how people will remember me or anything that I might be associated with as a legacy. I really believe that this is a great place, and I've had a small part in making it better. It'll get much better in the future. The next dean will do very much more great things than I've done. So I don't think that way. I don't think in terms of what people will think about when they hear my name. But, I guess if there is a reference to me in the future, I hope it will be associated with the passion I have for students, and that I've worked with students and developed a number of programs with the help of a lot of people, and the passion I have for OSU. So that's how I want to be remembered.
I guess I actually have one more final question. Are you going to die with your boots on?
I might.
You've been dean 24 years now.
I have no.
Are you got any retirement plans in the future? Are you sure is your life after OSU for you?
I have no plans as of today. That could change any day.
I wouldn't ask for a specific day. Just hard to imagine the College of Engineering, that Karl Reid.
I was going to retire at normal age, but I was having so much fun that I wanted to do one more thing. We had a building to build, and so I wanted to manage that process. And I wanted to I needed to hire a couple of department heads, and it was just kind of an awkward time when it was normal for me to retire. Of course, I saw Jay Boggs stay with it for a number of years and how much of a contribution he made, and so I didn't see that there was anything wrong with my staying, as long as I was still contributing, as long as I was still passionate about my job, and I'm, as of today, I'm still passionate about it. But I've had many times to think about whether I should have retired or not, and maybe I should have. But maybe I made a little more contribution by staying.
I'm glad you did.
Good.
Thanks, Karl. Okay.
You ask about experiences that are related to important people in my life, and one that I did not mention earlier was Herbert Richardson. Herbert Richardson was a young faculty member at MIT when I was a new graduate student, new doctoral student. And I went into his classroom one day to just observe. And this was after I decided I might want to consider a career in academia. And I was astounded at what I saw. Students in the classroom obviously were missing the point on several things he had talked about. But he was very quick and took the feedback from them and adjusted on the spot. And I saw a master teacher, and I saw some qualities of a master teacher. And that was very important in shaping my career as a teacher. He was also an outstanding researcher. But where he had the biggest impact on me was when I was a relatively young faculty member. I might have been an associate professor. I'd had some interaction with people in the professional societies. But he called me one day and asked me if I would direct a program sponsored by the National Science Foundation to basically reorganize a program. It's a $3 million program in dynamic systems control. And I'd been an advisor to that program. He asked me to take on this project. And the project involved my finding 30 people that would be willing to come together and brainstorm on and develop a report on what the research goals, direction should be for that one program. I had a superstar cast, and I was one of the youngest ones in the cast. We had the director of research for General Motors as a primary speaker that kind of catalyzed all of us. Herb Richardson was senior to me. He later became dean at MIT, later became vice chancellor and dean at Texas A&M, then chancellor, and then stepped back to direct the nation's largest transportation center, which was his love technically. But Herb, when he called me, I said to Herb, I'm just a young guy. I don't really have really concerned about. He said, don't worry about it. He helped me very carefully, the way in which a person should mentor. He didn't take over. He didn't tell me what to do. He just kind of created a situation that allowed me to grow into it. So with 30 people, we developed a report which resulted in reorganizing a whole division, developing another division. So we had instead of a $3 million impact, we had a $50 or $60 million impact. And those two divisions now are more like $150 million. So I'm very proud of that. But I'm most proud of the fact that Herb trusted in me to do that. As a result of that, I was asked to do another one at Oak Ridge National Labs to determine the research directions for a new center that involved robotics. Center for Engineering Advanced Systems Research was what it was called. And it was a group of scientists that come out of the nuclear area and developed this program. And the idea was to develop a robot that could go into a place like 3 Mile Island, find the problem, correct the problem, change the valve, come out, and never have anybody, human being, exposed to it. That was the paradigm they were working with. And I developed the team. I invited the people to come in and do that work. And it was widely thought of by the Department of Energy, well thought of by the Department of Energy. So Herb Richardson got me involved in that, as well as a fellow by the name of Mike Ravens, who was at Brooklyn Polytechnic when I first met him. And he came to MIT, and I was cleaning out a laboratory, and I had some opportunity and authority to do that. And I gave him a hydraulic test stand, and we became instant friends. And then I followed him through committee chairman, vice president of ASME, and he just had a tremendous impact on me. So Herb Richardson and Mike Ravens had the major impact on my professional career, relating to service to my profession. I serve the profession as a teacher, as a researcher, as a dean, but serving the profession in a greater sense or another way through professional societies has been a priority of mine. And I encourage all of our faculty to engage in things like that because it broadens your whole view of things. Plus, it allows you as a member of the faculty at Oklahoma State University to demonstrate that Oklahoma State University is a great place.
Anything else?
That's it.
Thanks, Karl. Appreciate it.
I've rambled enough.